Hello, everyone, and welcome to In-House Counsel Insights, where we will showcase different in-house attorneys and ask them about their experiences and tips that they might have about being an in-house attorney or tips for outside counsel. So today I have with us Dave Taylor, who has experience including being Deputy General Counsel for a FinTech startup. Welcome, Dave. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Chris. It's a pleasure to be with you.
So would you start off just by telling our viewers what your experience was before becoming an in-house attorney?
Sure. In my case, I have spent most of my career, which is approaching 20 years here, most of my career at law firms. I had never been in-house before recent experience. And it was primarily in a corporate securities setting. Now, I did have a little bit of an interruption in the middle where I did my LLM in securities and financial regulation, but my focus has always been on a corporate securities practice. In many cases, focused on financial services, private funds, investment advisor, and regulatory issues that kind of go with that. And in serving those kind of clients, opportunities have naturally come up through the years. Most recent was the first one that I've accepted, but this has all kind of come at me through private law practice, which is, of course, fair disclosure, that's how you and I met when we were both at a prior firm together.
And you said opportunities came up. So what kind of opportunity was it? Was it a client that came to you and asked you if you were interested in going in-house?
Yeah. In fact, all of the opportunities that have come up through the years have come, at least the ones that have been most seriously considered, have come through client relationships. Seems like, when you already have that fiduciary obligation, it's easier to build the trust that going in-house seems to require.
That totally makes sense, and that seems to be the natural path, and that's certainly what happened to me when I went in-house. So I'm going to switch gears a little bit, and I want to talk about some of the challenges maybe that you've faced or experienced as an in-house attorney.
Sure. I guess if we make it free form, I'll jump right in and I'll tell you a little bit about the biggest challenge to learn to deal with when you're at a law firm. You are the profit center, right? The generation of the revenue, the purpose for the existence of a law firm is to provide legal services, and your role at a law firm is to generate a profit. It takes a little getting used to, but when you go in-house, you're a cost center. And so you have to kind of change your mindset from revenue to cost. And when you change that mindset, you and I both come from large firms where we're used to these incredibly precise and every word considered, carefully considered documents, right? Things that are almost artistic in how they have to be. Sometimes, as I've had someone point out to me, sometimes on the in-house side, you need a Chevy, not a Ferrari.
Right.
And that's no knock on Chevys or maybe Ferraris. But the idea is you need the type of vehicle that suits the task. And sometimes, coming from large law firms, it requires you to adjust your thinking to really analyze what work needs to go into this and make sure that your cost is justified as opposed to the revenue that you're used to producing as a lawyer at a law firm.
Right. And you were talking about going from the profit center to the cost center. So how do you add value as an in-house attorney?
Gosh, that's a good point. And I'll give you a specific type of example, right? We're used to, as lawyers at a law firm, we will disassemble a contract for services, right? And we'll look for the right words because precision is important. especially with the way that junior associates are taught. Precision's important. When you have a service that is required, on the other hand, when you're in-house and a business center needs an agreement, sometimes you can't let perfect be the enemy of the good. And while I might not have chosen that word, I need to analyze, is that word going to be enough to describe what's going to happen, and really just drill down on what the real issues are, as opposed to, the perfection or the font size. Although, in regulatory world, sometimes font size is a question, but in a service contract, it's not.
Right, and it's important to know the difference. So that's great advice. So what was your favorite thing? What has been your favorite thing about being an in-house attorney?
It's the creativity. I always thought, because of some of the law firms that I've had the pleasure of working for, they had creative large projects, and I always imagined that, those poor guys on the other side in-house, they don't get to do that kind of thing. They don't get the creativity, but that's not the case at all. I've been, my experience in-house has been, it's almost, you have to be more creative, because the solutions you can't have, again, the Ferrari with every perfect knob. You have to be creative with what you have, with the resources you have, and find solutions in a different way than at a law firm, where you're focused really on maybe a single type of task. And I've enjoyed that creativity.
That's great. And you mentioned resources. Did you have the resources to work with outside counsel when you were in-house?
The short answer is yes, but the more nuanced answer is you have to understand when you really need that. There's a temptation. Maybe the analogy is, the way we eat dinner. I've been accused maybe a few times of eating out too much, right? And I like a good restaurant and appreciate a good restaurant, but sometimes the solution is to cook the chicken that's in the refrigerator, instead of going to your favorite restaurant and having them do the same thing. You have to understand, I think in-house, you have to understand what's in your refrigerator, and resist the temptation to go to, just because the law firm can do it, you need to know where that money is best spent, or your CFO or your GC or maybe even your CEO are going to ask questions about why you spent that money. And so it's actually a good exercise, I think, for anybody who's considering in-house. How much do you like to eat out?
That's great. Absolutely love that analogy. So when you did work with outside counsel, did you have any requirements for outside counsel, or what would you say makes a great outside counsel to work with, someone that you would want to work with?
So that's a good question, because as I said, I spent most of my career on the firm side, and so what I've learned to appreciate is the person who is sensitive enough to understand, all right, these are the issues you might need, versus just spending the money and going and calling the person that does all of these subsets. Let me put this a different way. Let's see if I can put it a little more clearly. I appreciate the person who says, these are issues, I'll do it. I can go find that guy or that woman wherever they are, but those are issues and it's up to you. Do you want me to do that? The issue spotting versus spending the money ahead of time. And I can't say I've had bad experiences along those lines. It's just, it turns out I've appreciated the lawyer at the firm who issue spots and and gives me the opportunity to kind of select from that buffet, if you will. I found that to be, more useful. And I find that I want to call that person back and say, all right, here's the issue spotting exercise. Where do we go from here? I find that person very helpful.
Right. And so you answered earlier what you liked about being in-house. And if you can, I understand if you can't, but maybe generally say, maybe if there were some things that you didn't like about being in-house, or maybe put differently, was better being outside counsel.
Outhouse counsel.
Yeah,
right.
outhouse, in the outhouse.
Can I reframe the question maybe to what my
Absolutely, please.
most interesting, kind of the most interesting part of the contrast? It's almost the challenge that I both enjoyed and been frustrated with at the same time. I was reflecting on this the other day. My undergraduate degree is in management, and during that, I'm just old enough that the Challenger, explosion was a topic. The analysis of what led to that was a topic in business school. It was one of the cases that we went through, and I remember this video. Forgive me if I get a detail or two wrong, but it's what has been in mind, during experience in-house. The engineers at the company that built the rocket had apparently had repeated meetings with NASA administrators, and there was a term that I remember from the class where the engineers would say, "We don't believe this is for the good." And apparently that's an engineering term. And the NASA administrators, who might not have been, they weren't people who were evil, but it was there might have been a misunderstanding in terms of what the engineers meant by "this isn't for the good" versus what an administrator trying to make an executive decision might have believed is good. They were using the same word two different ways. And we have, as lawyers, we have so much jargon. And by the way, that's no knock on either NASA or the rocket maker. It's intended to just be something that as a lawyer, I've reflected on. Sometimes we use words in our discussions with executives or with colleagues, even with a bit of a legal background, that we call them terms of art in the legal world, but they might be terms that other people don't understand the way that we mean them. And so, the legal shorthand that you and I use with each other, we need to be a little bit more aware of when that legal shorthand means something else. And I think part of the utility that an in-house lawyer, and I guess an advice piece that I would say, if you're considering going in-house, listen to the words that you use and think about whether they could mean something else to someone else. And I think that that's been that was both a frustration and a pleasant surprise, to hear as business or operations people, say the words you use back. The good ones will say, "Okay, this is what I hear," and it gives you the opportunity to say, "You know what? I wonder if that's what I meant." So there's kind of my observation.
That's great advice. Thank you. So you mentioned outside attorneys considering going in-house. Do you have any tips for outside attorneys that might want to go in-house?
Well, sure. I think the biggest tip is flexibility. While it's going to be important to understand what the company does and what you might do that is a particular use to the company. In my case, I'm a financial services regulatory guy, and so generally that is what's of most use to a company that would be working with me. But that doesn't mean that that's all you're going to do. As I pointed out earlier, it's a cost center, and so the more utility that you can offer, the better, the more useful you will be in-house. I have I've found everything from employment to general contract law has been, on my plate. And I find that interesting, right? It is both an opportunity and a challenge. The opportunity is, to apply these other tangential things that you've learned through the years. And the challenge is to embrace that in going in-house. And so there's kind of my advice.
Okay. And this is going to be my last question. The legal landscape is changing with AI robots now doing traffic hearings, and you got to stay on top of it, right? I'm sure you do. So do you have any resources you can share? Are there any people or written resources that you follow in order to stay abreast of these topics?
Well, this is a good question. I do, this isn't an advertisement for LinkedIn, but I think it's, properly used, LinkedIn is a great resource. There are a lot of people who are in-house who make great observations on LinkedIn. One of my former classmates, who actually I coached on a moot court team many more years ago than I can count. Her name is May Ortiz, and she's in-house at Toyota. She has a LinkedIn that just offers some. I find myself clicking on if she posts something, it's interesting to me. Now, she's focused on employment law, but her observations about dealing with in-house personalities they've been very valuable to me. There's some business people out there that I watch. If you look at the General Counsel of Coinbase is someone I follow who posts.
I do too.
Yeah, in fact, it might have been you at some point who recommended this, but I follow him and find his insights interesting. There is a friend I grew up with in North Texas, a guy named Jason Walton. He's not a lawyer, but I follow his posts quite a bit on LinkedIn. And LinkedIn isn't the only resource here. I think as much as anything else, though, it's important to follow resources, right? If we just are staying in our own, within the box that we're used to, we're not going to learn about the AI-driven changes to law that might be coming down the pike. And so I think you raise a great point there, just in terms of being open to ideas that we might not have, in our experience run across.
Well, we got to get some of those people on the show next. Dave, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for being here. And most of all, thank you for sharing your experience with other people.